This is a paper that is a shortened form of an article coming out in the Journal of Early Christian Studies. Should be next spring. Should take me only 13 minutes, so I'm hopeful to get your questions and improvements. So one could call it a miracle. Humans eliminate waste after food's convoluted journey of absorption through 15 feet of intestinal cavity. We take what we need and we expel the rest. The remainder is not stored as suet, pus, or wax. The toxins are exercised, as it were, through the bowels. The waste product itself is putrid and shunned, but luckily, the rear end faces backward, far away from mouth and nose to prevent nausea and embarrassment. For all this, we can be grateful to the archons. Yet few would deny that the defecation process often remains messy, uncomfortable, and uncontrolled. When the bowels come knocking, we know not the day nor the hour. Whole forests are chopped down for toilet paper, and dirty diapers form mountain chains in the world's landfills. Several diseases are diagnosed by watery stool, an ailment named with the delightfully logical Greek compound meaning through flow, diarrhea. And when it comes to digestive problems, some pray God that they do not defecate. Others beg that they can. The human body is good as it is, but surely we can envision one that defies the dictum of Taro Gomi's children's book, quote, "Everyone poops," unquote. Humor aside, the aim of this essay is to shed light on Valentinus Fragment 3, preserved by Clement of Alexandria. In the Clementine context, the reader is exhorted to embrace self-control and kratia, to make oneself a eunuch by cutting away all lust in contrast to the angels who fell from heaven. Clement then cited in support a letter from Valentinus, wherein his key term enkratia twice appears in a fascinating Christological meditation. I'll just give my translation. It's variously translated. Quote, Valentinus says in his letter to Agathopus, here's a quote within the quote, "Having endured everything, he was self-controlled. Jesus produced divinity. He ate and drank in a peculiar way, not excreting foodstuffs. So great was the power of self-control in him that the nourishment within him was not corrupted because he was not able to be corrupted," unquote. So in this essay, I focus on the physiological digestive background of this fragment as illumined by the scientific literature of its day, and then discuss the relevance for Valentinus. In the ancient world, digestion was conceived of as a form of change or alteration, metaphily or aliosis. Food changed from one state to another as it passed through the gut. Celsus, the 1st century CE author of On Medicine, summarized several theories of digestion. Quote, some following Erasistratus contend that food is ground up in the belly. Others following Plastonicus, pupil of Praxagoras, say that food is putrefied. Others believe with Hippocrates that food is concocted by heat. And there are followers of Asclepiades who propound that nothing is concocted, but that crude material is transmitted throughout the body, just as it was swallowed, unquote. In the Hippocratic tradition, digestion was not only a concocting, but also a putrefying process. In the Hippocratic treatise on anatomy, for instance, the esophagus is called the mouth of the putrefying gut, septices, chelaes, and the Hippocratic treatise on affects refers to an unputrefied food, or unputrefied foods. Aristotle's theory of digestion followed both Plastonicus and the Hippocratics. Digestion was a kind of boiling or hepsis, which changed the color and quality of food. A boiling-like activity occurs in the stomach, a part of digestion called concoction or pepsis. Concoction did not degrade food, but rather perfected it. Quote, for when something is concocted, Aristotle said, it's perfected or completed. Teleiotai. During that concoction, both matter and moisture are mastered. Mastering ensures the softening and separation of food, thus making it fit for absorption. The result of concoction for Aristotle is 1, the animal's nourishment, and 2, the byproduct, or peritoma, both solid and liquid. Both kinds of byproducts are partly useful for the body and partly useless. The solid byproduct travels through the intestines, where it is further concocted in the upper gut, anochelia. The useless byproduct then undergoes a different process, namely putrefaction, sepsis, in the lower gut. The putrefied matter is then temporarily stored in the lower gut before evacuation. For Aristotle, putrefaction is the opposite of concoction. Putrefaction is, quote, the change of the substrate into the moist, unquote. It occurs when the subject does not have enough heat to master the food and thus break down its matter. According to Aristotle, quote, what is putrefied is the byproduct of what is concocted, unquote. Putrefaction is a separate process that occurs in a different organ. In this separate process, the food is not completed, but degraded. For this theory of internal putrefaction, Aristotle was probably improving on the notions of Empedocles. Empedocles referred to digestion as putrefaction. For the idea that concoction resembles putrefaction, Plutarch invoked Empedocles as well, specifically his line that, quote, water putrefied beneath the bark of the vine turns into wine, unquote. Valentinus' younger contemporary Galen observed that what many doctors call pepses, Empedocles referred to as sepses, and digestion occurs, according to Empedocles, occurred by putrefaction. And Galen also observed that what doctors of his time referred to as unconcocted apepto was by ancient custom called unputrefied asecta. Now, despite the many differences in the theories of digestion, a wide array of ancient authors agreed, at least, that one part of it involved putrefaction or corruption. The idea that digestion is, at least in part, a process of corruption, it seems, has a kind of intuitive appeal. An anonymous medical writer pointed out, quote, there's a certain opinion that foods are altered in the stomach by putrefaction, taking its starting point, it seems, from stool passed through the gut, unquote. The idea seems to be that since feces appears in the form of rotted and spoiled matter, the process of rotting or corruption occurred in the lower gut. So I propose that Valentinus, who, as an educated man, likely had a general knowledge of ancient physiology, assumed with many of his contemporaries that digestion involved putrefaction. Given this assumption, he had to decide whether or not Jesus putrefied food in his gut. Valentinus, I hypothesize, regarded putrefaction or corruption in Jesus as theologically inappropriate. To quote a later summary of Valentinian theory, admittedly in a different context, what is spiritual and divine cannot receive corruption. Quod spiritala impossibile esse corruptalem per cepere. Jesus' digestive process must then have differed from the common human process, which involved putrefaction. Valentinus' theological sensibilities weren't unique. Clement of Alexandria quoted Valentinus' opinion with approval, and Pseudo-Basil of Caesarea also favorably quoted this passage in the 4th century from Valentinus, probably getting it from Clement, without acknowledging Valentinus' authorship. Melito of Sardis argued against an unnamed exegete who tried to prove that Jesus, after his baptism, experienced physical and natural functions, including the excretion of putrefied and concocted food. What Melito specifically remarked against this exegete is unfortunately unknown, though he may well have argued with Valentinus that Jesus' divine nature precluded internal putrefaction. Clement, Melito, and Valentinus were not Docetists in any meaningful sense of the term. They had no intent to deny Jesus' humanity. Given ancient theories of digestion, they could well accept that Jesus concocted food in his stomach, deriving nourishment from it. Otherwise, he couldn't have lived a biological life. At the same time, Jesus did not putrefy his food, which must have been wholly mastered by heat and absorbed. His body did not engage in the process of putrefaction with its messy and impure result, defecation. Now, did Jesus' body naturally not admit of corruption, or did he have to work for it through moral and ascetical labor? Well, the quote from Valentinus is disappointingly brief, yet even within its short compass, labor seems to be implied. Panta hupamenos. Jesus endured or held out against, bore, perhaps even suffered all things. His power of or ability for self-control and krateos dynamis was made, not born. Thus it had real moral worth, which made Jesus a moral exemplar. Jesus' hard-won self-control presumably changed, or perhaps one might say restored, his physiology. His guts did not admit of rot. Moral effort brought about a physical result, the absence of decay. One might inquire whether Jesus at some point defecated, soiling his swaddling clothes as a baby, perhaps, but overcoming this problem as an adult? To answer this question would involve speculation. Still, one can indeed imagine some kind of transformation of Jesus' intestinal physiology through moral effort. Instead of corruption, Jesus produced divinity, theatata, Jesus, ergazata. In other words, Jesus produced through nourishment a body, a real one, that was divine, meaning incorruptible and deathless. According to Valentinus, to conclude, Jesus' body was both the same and different from fallen human bodies. Jesus had all the digestive organs that present humans have, but they did not work in the same way because Jesus' self-control had changed the nature of his body and digestive process. His body, in short, did not contain corruption. As a result, Jesus did not produce waste. When Valentinus made this remark, he assumed, I think, that the process of fallen human digestion included a stage in which the food was putrefied in the gut. For Valentinus, it was unholy and thus wrong for an incorruptible Jesus to contain putrefaction. Instead, Jesus' body produced immortality, immortal intestines that fueled his incorruptible, that is, divine life. Valentinus' remark is this a concrete example of the general Valentinian point that Jesus, quote, cast aside his passions, apollon pathi. Passions, as is well known, are not just feelings, but experiences of weakness and compulsion due to bodily needs. One of these pathi was, surely, the sometimes uncomfortable and embarrassing experience of defecation. Not only does Valentinus' fragment speak against ancient and modern constructions of Docetism, it does nothing to undermine the unfallen humanity of Jesus as conceived of by ancient Christians, including Clement of Alexandria and Pseudo-Basil. Christ did not excrete waste because he was self-controlled, not because he had a pneumatic body. That said, Valentinus might conceivably have called Jesus' body spiritual insofar as it had conquered the needs and decay of the flesh. Valentinus was one of the first Christian theologians to work out what it meant physiologically for Jesus to live out his divine humanity on earth. We might even call Christ's gut, for Valentinus, the site of the first Eucharist, wherein what was mortal, human food, became immortal flesh. And in theory, at least, Jesus was a model of deification, seen as corporeal transformation, at least for those who could follow him in his passionless state of self-control. Thank you so much.